Hi, I'm Debs.
Hi, I'm Ruth.
Welcome to Art Alchemy, authentic conversations on art and cultivating a creative mind. Today,
We're going to be talking about creative confidence, which is a big subject, isn't it? Something that we had quite a long chat actually before we started recording on all sorts of things related to confidence as well.
we're
Something
talking
that I
about our own
think
confidence. It is an ongoing
it
thing, isn't
is definitely, and I think as artists, it's quite a scary thing to do, quite a brave thing to do actually, being an artist, because there's no particular outcome for us and there's no kind of guidebook on what to do. So
it?
that makes it even more challenging. I hope today that we'll unpack the whole confidence thing a little bit for you and help you with any aspects that you may be struggling with a little bit.
And also, I think sometimes it's a feedback thing as well, isn't it? It's quite tricky because you do get feedback from different people
Yeah.
that is quite different.
Yeah. Everyone's got an opinion, haven't they? On
They
your
have,
art. So it's
yeah.
dealing with all of that as well.
And of course, people's opinions are often just their opinion.
It's not
Yeah.
facts. Yeah.
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 And the other thing is, it doesn't matter whether you're a hobby artist, so to speak,
Mm.
or a professional artist. There's still no roadmap, is there? You have
No,
to
there's
find out
still
who
no
you
right
are.
way of doing things. So you've really got to be confident and brave to keep stepping forward.
Mm.
And you never really know where it's going to lead you either, which can be challenging, exciting, and wonderful and brilliant as to what can unfold. But at the same time, it can be a challenge on your confidence.
It can. But it's so rewarding because gaining the confidence means that you move forward and it endless benefits to it, I
Yeah.
would say,
Yeah, definitely.
from an artist's point of view.
I think the first thing that we were going to talk about is what is confidence, because I think sometimes this is something that people get confused about. Maybe they think that you're naturally born with confidence. Maybe it's something they think that you've either got or you've not. But I think both our experiences, Debs, probably match up. You said an interesting thing about confidence earlier, that you have to start with courage first. You need to have the courage just to give it a go and get started, even though you're scared anyway. And that's how you build confidence.
Yeah, so people have always said to me that I'm quite a confident person. And I think that's how I come across. And I remember people saying this about me at school. But actually, I was really quite shy.
Mm.
And I remember somebody saying to me, when you're a teenager, and I used to blush when people it's just,
Yeah.
and somebody said, you just have to pretend
Yeah.
that you're not blushing. Yeah.
Yeah.
You just have to just go ahead anyway. And once you do that, guess what? You stop blushing. It's really weird. And it's
It's
the
funny,
same with
isn't it?
this, isn't it? It's the
Yeah,
same.
it's almost back to front as to how you think it should be.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of people think that you need to have confidence before you can even try to do something. Actually, what you've got to do is put yourself out there, go through that uncomfortable feeling, and then you'll build confidence off the back of that, because you'll realise that your worst fears 99.9% of the time don't come true when you do the thing that's scaring you. And
Particularly when it's just a piece of paper and you're just,
yeah,
put some paint on it. It's not actually that scary. Not really.
it's not, but it does take, if you're an artist out there and you're listening, or even if you're a hobby artist, having the courage to go and create a piece of art is a really brave thing to do. A lot of people don't even get that far, do they? They just don't
No,
allow themselves to even
no.
create because they don't know what's going to happen. So
Yeah.
I
And
think it is a really brave thing to do, to be an artist.
I think that's where a lot of the I can't draw, I've got
Mm.
talent and all that sort of thing comes from, really. I have no talent. And
Yeah.
it's a reason not to start, really.
Yeah.
And I've just realised something. I think that what happens is the reason that you feel uncomfortable is because you're going outside of your comfort zone. And you're going outside of your comfort zone because it's something that you haven't done before. And the thing with art is every new canvas, you haven't done it before. You can get to a point where you're painting in a similar way to what you always have. But if you're striving to find out who you are authentically, you're always trying to get somewhere new. And that's the uncomfortableness.
Yeah.
So even when you've been painting for years, you will go through a little bit of an uncomfortable feeling when you're trying something new.
Mm.
It's just that you realise, because you're not a beginner, that is a normal part of that process. The opposite is, I've had times where I'm trying something new and you're absolutely excited about it and
Mm.
you're just going for it. You get that as well. You do
Mm.
get that.
Mm.
So when you very first start and you're not sure what to do and where to start, that part of it is much more difficult
Yeah,
to
it
get
is.
through, I think.
Yeah,
But once you've
definitely.
done a few, and sometimes looking back can help as well, can't it? If you've done a few and then
Yeah,
you can go, oh yeah, I
yeah.
have done this. I am improving.
And I do think once you've got a bit more confidence, I think you realise why it's so in as well to have confidence as an artist, because it can really stifle you if you don't have that kind of baseline confidence. So when you were talking there, Debs, about as you get more and more practiced as an artist, it does get easier and you've got less resistance to doing new things and trying new things. I think that's the only way really to build your creativity that's authentic around yourself as well, because you let go a bit of that fear and you're tapping more into like your intuitive side as well.
And I think it's even more than that as well. It shows. So
It does. It shows
it
on the
really shows
canvas,
on the, yeah,
unfortunately. You can't
yes.
hide it, can you?
So if you're being authentic, and that
Yeah,
also means for you that you're comfortable in yourself and confident, etc.,
yeah,
then what actually happens is that as you paint, somebody will look at the painting that you've done and they'll feel that,
yeah.
because that's what starts to happen. You actually get that feeling into it. So if you're doing it very tentatively, it's
Mm,
not just that it shows in a physical way. And I'm not talking about the people that are hyper realistic and using tiny brushes for a technique effect, but if you're less likely to use bigger strokes, you're
yeah.
less
It
likely to
feels
use very
tight, doesn't it?
confident,
It
it feels
constrains.
tighter. So
Yeah,
I'm not talking about hyperrealism
yeah.
where that's
That's more
a different
controlled,
technique.
isn't it?
It's more
Yeah.
controlled, but it's you can be a hyper realistic painter, and I still believe that confidence can show
Mm,
that you're, yeah.
yeah,
Yes. So there is a tightness to it that you can
yeah.
actually see. It's interesting, really
It
interesting.
is. And I think essentially that's the path to producing quality art that connects to people if you can open yourself up and be authentic and vulnerable, actually, which is another side of confidence, isn't it?
It is.
It's
And I
kind of
think,
a bit of a balance, isn't it? To being vulnerable enough to
yeah,
show yourself, but not lacking confidence. It's about trying to get that balance.
yes. So I think when you're vulnerable, that's when you're painting with confidence.
Mm,
Right. Okay. So when you're vulnerable, that's when you're doing what you said right at the very beginning. You're painting with courage. So this is why
mm,
we're saying that the courage is the confidence.
yeah,
Yeah. So you're feeling vulnerable because
yeah,
but you're doing it anyway.
yeah.
And by doing that, you are painting with confidence, even if it feels really vulnerable. That's
Mm.
so this is our definition. So we're not saying anybody else is defining it like this, but that's what we've come to the conclusion, isn't it?
I think the other reason as to why creative confidence is so important for artists is that you've got to be able to go out into the world, show up, explain what you're doing, why you're doing whatever you're doing to other people, and feel at least comfortable enough to be able to articulate yourself. And I think you do need confidence to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Would you
And
agree?
yes, I do. I do. And I agree, even when you first start out, even as a hobby artist,
Mm,
people will ask you about your work. And I think what you need to realize is that you know your work better than anybody else,
Mm.
and you know why you've done that piece, and you don't have to explain it. You can let people see for themselves. What you have to do is not be swayed by other people's
Mm.
opinion. Because so
Mm.
somebody could look at Ruth's work, you look at her work behind there and say, I wouldn't paint like that.
Mm.
Or I don't like paintings like that. They're too bright. They're
I've
too.
had some really funny comments, Debs. I'll give you one. I had one guy at Glasgow Art Fair tell me that people in Scotland don't like colourful things.
Well, there you go.
How?
Sorry.
I didn't know what to say to that. I was like, I think I just nodded politely and then he walked off. I just thought, what a bizarre thing to say. What a sweeping comment to say.
Sweeping, yeah. Everybody in Scotland, everybody who's out there, do comment if you do like colourful painting.
Scotland's famous for its colourist movement. I could have thrown that back at him, but I
You
just
could have done, but you probably were not. We're a bit like, sorry.
yeah, so left field. But maybe 5, 10 years ago, that would have knocked me off my feet a little bit more. But I had a bit of a giggle about it. So it's been able to bounce back from things like that because it is funny what some people will say to you.
Yeah, they do. And they often do say the first thing that's coming into their head, and they're really not necessarily meaning to knock your art either.
Yeah,
It's really weird. They
it's
do say
funny.
these things. Yeah. It's just, oh, I like your old stuff better.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay. But I like the fact that I'm moving forward.
And that's you, and you've got to be able to stand in that and say, okay, that's your opinion, but I'm going to keep going down this path anyway.
Would you say that it's easier to do that if you are painting with authenticity as opposed to, because if you try to paint for what you think other people want,
Yeah.
that's so difficult because everybody wants something different. So how can
Yeah.
you?
And you
You're
can't
splitting
possibly
yourself.
please anyone. And I think ultimately that's not the path to confidence either, because you really, to get true confidence is being your authentic self. You're never really going to become confident in what you're producing if you're doing it for somebody else and not for yourself either. So I think that's really important.
Point on critique.
Mm.
And I wonder whether you agree with this or not. So when we did creative writing at Open University, and they taught us how to critique in a way. So they taught us to have a look at a piece of work and say what the positives are.
Mm-hmm.
So I teach my students to do this as well. What is good about it? When I say good about it, what is it that's moving you? Is it or what is it that's you can see as a good composition or whatever?
Mm.
And then you say where it could be improved rather than what's bad about it.
Yeah.
And you can actually, if somebody gives you a piece of critique, a piece of criticism, even if it's quite a strong criticism that hits the mark, it can be really great, can't it? Because you go, oh, that's where I'm
Yeah.
going wrong, or oh,
Yeah.
I can see that now.
Yeah.
It's when they're giving you a criticism that isn't valid
Yeah.
that you can sometimes feel. But if you're feeling the non-valid criticism, I'm not sure if I'm making sense here, then that's the criticism that you need to be not feeling. Yeah.
Yeah. To let go of. And I
Yeah.
think a clue to that is when somebody tells you something very vague, like people in Scotland don't like colour. That's a clue. Not
That's
being,
sweeping, not vague. I think you were right. It's like the
not
whole
holding
of
on to this at
Scotland.
all.
Oh, sorry.
But I think if you're receiving constructive criticism, it should be specific and hopefully something actionable. And I think if you've got genuine constructive criticism that's helpful and not intended to be hurtful, I think it is much easier to swallow.
It's not just much easier. We're asking for feedback at the moment in
Mm.
Art Hub, aren't we?
Yeah,
We want the feedback. We're
you
desperate for
want to
people to give us
improve. Yeah,
feedback. We've had some very good feedback.
yeah,
And you have to sift through it. And it's the other thing that they said to us was that even if you don't agree,
mm.
And the same person, sorry, it's lots of people are saying the same criticism, because bear in mind we were asking for critiques. At that point, you go, okay, maybe I ought to consider this.
Yeah.
But if one person says something and
Yeah.
it's not hitting the mark and you think, I don't agree with that completely,
Yeah.
then it could just be their opinion. And people have such a lot of opinion on art. It's quite understandable. We do. We have
Yeah.
opinion on art. We like some art more than others. That's what you're meant to do. You can't, if you were a person who liked everything, that would be very odd.
Yeah,
It would, wouldn't
definitely.
it?
Yeah.
Think about it.
Yeah.
I like every piece of art in the world. But haven't you got an opinion? No, I like everything.
Yeah.
It's just, it's not right either, is it?
No.
That's somebody who's not tapping into their own self. So, yeah, people will come out with quite strong statements sometimes,
Yeah.
but you have to learn that is probably quite a big one for creative confidence, isn't it?
It
Being able
is.
to cope with
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're going to be talking about how to build creative confidence, and I suppose this is about the ingredients that you need for creative confidence.
But also trying to give you some tips, but breaking it down so that you've got building blocks rather than actually
Yeah.
doing it. Because I think what happens is that you've got the overwhelm thing.
Yeah.
If you try to, for example, learn to paint and you go in and you think, oh, I just can't do this, it's because you've got so many different little bits. You're looking at the whole picture. Did you see what I did there?
You,
Sorry, that was a bit of a pun. You're looking or whatever it was. But you're looking at you're trying to do it all at once
yeah.
instead of thinking, okay, I've got to learn how to use the paint, how to use the brushes, how to whatever, that sort of thing. And by doing it a little bit at a time, that helps,
Yeah,
doesn't it?
it does. That's a really big thing. And I think a lot of people sometimes they look ahead too far as well. They think if I start painting in the next 5 years, I'm going to need a studio. How do I afford to do all of that? And you can almost stop yourself before you even start if you think too far ahead as well. So it's definitely about taking those little steps one bit at a time. And a big thing as well now is that it can be easy to get overwhelmed with the amount of information that we've got online in terms of what method of painting do you use, what
Yeah.
materials do you want to use, what size, etc. So there's potential to get bogged down by all of that as well. Whereas I think you probably just need to choose one thing and just try it. And then you can always change path and direction as you go. And you will, because you'll find things that you enjoy. You might find that you prefer watercolour to acrylic paint, for instance, but you're not going to be able to figure all of that stuff out before you just start going. Again, it's about having that courage, isn't it, to get started.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, and also you can go down the materials rabbit hole, which I think I
Yeah,
do still,
we've all been there.
where you're like going, oh, and I could try that
Yeah,
out, and oh, it'll just be better if I can just do
yeah.
this.
Or if I
And
can
then you
just
end
buy
up
that
with,
more expensive paint, when really it's more about building up your technical skills and things like that, isn't it? And keep practicing.
yeah. Although I do sometimes think that when you start, you want a good quality student paint if you can. It doesn't have to be
Yeah,
expensive.
yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. You want something that's a decent standard. What I'm saying is that you don't need to go out there and buy super expensive stuff and think that that's going to be the answer to
Or
making good
every
art.
new thing that's on the market. Yeah. I like to show people different tools and materials so they can have a go. So in the studio I do this let's create things and I provide materials because I have gone down rabbit holes in the past and bought a lot of material. And what happens is they have a go and it either suits them or it doesn't. But like you say, getting a general foundation is a really good place to start, isn't
Yeah,
it? Just getting a
yeah.
foundation.
Another thing as well is having a space, whether that's just a kitchen table or something already set up so you've got somewhere to go to do your art, because sometimes what happens is you think, oh, I've got to get this out, I've got to get my sketchbook out, my paints, etc., etc. If you can have, even if it's just a small dedicated space, that really helps you get going quickly as well, doesn't it?
And it doesn't even have to be, if you're working at your kitchen table, we're not expecting you to have your paints out all the time.
No.
Just have something where I used to have when I was watercolouring, this was at the very beginning, I had a little
Mm.
toolbox and I had all my stuff in there with my
Yeah.
paints that I use on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And I might have had some extra colours somewhere else, but everything was in this tiny toolbox. It was about
Yeah.
that sort of big. And then I used to just have boards with that had stretch paper, and so the
Mm.
paper was ready.
Mm-hmm.
And then you could do a bit at home because it was just ready. All my brushes were in one place as
Yeah.
well. That's it, isn't it? A
Yeah.
bit of water,
That's it.
and you're
That's
ready
what
to
you need.
start,
Yeah.
really. I always have, if I'm going to go out sketching, even now, I have a sketch bag ready.
Mm.
So little things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Really help, don't they? I think
they really
the
do.
other thing about, if we're talking about the whole practical side of art and practicing art and linking it back to confidence, you also need to accept that you're going to be making bad art as well, and art that you don't particularly like. And I think that happens more at the beginning because you're learning a skill, essentially. You need to remember it's not something that you're born with. You do have to keep practicing at it. And even as a more experienced artist, sometimes you'll make stuff and you'll think, what the heck is that? I'm never showing that to anybody. But that's part of the process, isn't it? You've got to do some rubbish stuff to get anywhere,
Yeah,
something that
I
you're
think
pleased with as well.
lots of rubbish stuff, to be fair.
Yeah.
A good place to do rubbish stuff as well is paper can sometimes be a good place to do
Yeah,
rubbish
definitely.
stuff.
And things like using your sketchbook as well to build things up and just explore ideas without having that pressure of doing a finished painting that you feel like you have to show to everybody else. So
Mm.
there's ways you
And
can practice that are less threatening in a way.
yeah, and also if you do something on canvas and you practice it and you don't want to waste, because people worry about wasting money and having to buy another canvas,
And
use
using
and
too
paint
much
over
paint, that's something that
things.
people worry about as well, isn't it?
It is. They definitely worry about using too much
Yeah.
paint, and and that is the worst thing you can do is put tiny amounts of acrylic out for
Yeah.
certain, because then you don't get a good result.
Yeah.
So by being too careful,
Mm.
but there are ways of preserving paint, aren't there? By covering it up after you've and reusing it in a different way.
Mm.
So yes, people
But
do.
you can all I've got canvases in my studio that I've painted over multiple times because I didn't like what I'd done, and they end up being practice canvases, or they might finish to a sellable piece of work. Even when you look back at really famous artists, they see if it's like a genuine or a fake, and they
Yeah,
can
when they
actually
do that,
scan the
they do
painting
this.
and see
Yes,
underneath it. And
yeah.
quite often you'll see, even the likes of Picasso, there was a
Mm.
painting underneath that he obviously wasn't happy with that he's painted over. So even the really famous artists create stuff that they're just, for whatever reason, it's not right.
And the other thing that happens as well is if you move into a different area of painting, you go through that learning curve again. You get a lot more paintings that aren't very good again because you're just experimenting and learning. I actually like the experimenting phase. So I think it's like that embrace that imperfection, because for every painting that you do, this my mum told me this when I don't know when, years and years ago. So she said, for every painting that you do that is successful, it's only the sum of what you've learned.
Yeah,
The failed paintings are the ones where you're actually learning because you're
yeah,
trying something new,
yeah.
you're moving on. So surprisingly, in the terms of you improving as an artist, the failed paintings are often really valuable
Mm,
and really important. And if you can embrace them like that, and
yeah,
think of them like that,
yeah.
it's a good way to think of them.
I think that also relates to general life though, doesn't it? You learn a lot more from a failure than you do
Mm,
from success because
It does.
it sticks with you, doesn't it? If something's not great.
And if you can reframe it as, the thing is, when you look at something and you go, okay, so what is it that's not working? And this might be tricky at the very beginning, because sometimes you just have to do a few paintings. Yeah, that's what happens at the beginning, isn't it? But when you get to a certain number of paintings, you're not talking about loads, yeah? Then you can start to go, okay, so what is it that I like that painting and
Yeah.
isn't working in that painting? And you can start comparing.
Yeah.
And I don't mean the comparing to other people. We'll talk about that later. I'm talking about comparing to yourself, comparing your own work.
Yeah.
And it's more about finding what you love, isn't it?
It is.
What is it that,
What is it
because
that you want?
sometimes somebody else will come along to that painting that you thought is absolutely rubbish, and they'll go, I really like that. And you go, do you? Really?
I'm
I'm like,
always
oh,
quite surprised what sells first and what takes longer to go.
yeah,
Don't think you can always predict that, can you?
no, definitely not.
I think that leads us quite nicely onto positive self-talk,
It does.
because that's an important aspect of confidence, is noticing what you actually say to yourself. We can be quite cruel to ourselves sometimes, what we say to ourselves. Quite often we wouldn't dream of saying to somebody. I think, Debs, you've spoke before about meditation and how that can help if you're actually observing some of your thoughts and almost take some of that emotion out of it and be able to see what you're telling yourself, because it's almost like an automated process, isn't it? We don't often realise what we're saying to ourselves or about ourselves.
Yeah, I think I was talking about noting, wasn't I?
Yeah,
So, what I mean by noting is you go, oh, I'm feeling really awful. Yeah. And it's like, well, what is it that I'm feel? Is it a feeling? Is it a
yeah,
thinking? And I just note it. Just what I mean by note it, you just say feeling, thinking. And just by actually identifying the fact that you're feeling like that, it just distances you slightly. But another way to reflect is the journaling side as well. I think that I've probably progressed, whether other people think so or not, from, because I'm moving from realism to more abstraction. So I feel like I've progressed lots. The paintings are quite different. So obviously you get different opinions from other people, but that's another story. But the way that I progressed was by putting things into journals and saying, what is it that I like, what isn't
yeah,
that I didn't,
yeah.
so that you're actually moving more and more towards what it is that you really want to say. And that takes time. It's not an instant thing. People don't become artists and go, I know exactly what I want to say. I know I want to be a landscape
No,
abstract artist
definitely
who
not. It's a
wants to say,
process of
that's
learning
not something that
about
you
yourself.
know.
Yeah.
And you have to try things out to see whether they suit you.
For me, I think journaling really gives me that space. I do it every morning and it just gives me that space to think about things and to put something down on paper without putting pressure on myself to have it all figured out either. So if we go back to the beginning of this chat, I think it's also about taking that and then take it in small steps. So what if I try this next in my painting? What if I bring in, for example, I don't know, some different kind of imagery that I want to add into my painting to give it another depth or another layer? What about if I try a new medium with my painting? It's just about doing little things, isn't it? Just to give you, just to keep pushing yourself forward. You don't need to completely change your style. And I think with your work, Debs, I can still see you in your old work as well as your new work. You can still
Yeah,
see that
people do.
connection there. It's just you've
Yeah,
pivoted
yeah.
slightly to something
Yeah,
different.
I got very excited. And yeah, I think it was in my old work, but I feel
Mm,
like I think I have become more process driven
mm,
than before.
mm.
That's the difference.
Yeah.
So I'm still saying the same thing. Yeah, I think that's the difference.
Just going to mention affirmations as well, because I've used those in the past to get over some negative self talk that I had around not just myself, but ideas around being an artist and the things that were standing in my way, to just change my thought patterns and my beliefs, because the things that you do tell yourself do stick with you. and it does change your perception of what's possible, which comes back to confidence again. It's about being able to go, I'm going to try this, because you're not going to try stuff if you don't think it's possible, are you? If you don't think it's possible to be a good painter, you're probably never really going to get going, or you might do it but not really push yourself with it. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And I think I like you were saying what if a lot earlier. And if you try something, you go, what if I just try
Yeah. Just be gentle on yourself and try it.
Yeah, what happens?
Yeah.
And if you frame it in that way, what if?
Yeah.
If it doesn't work, it's okay, isn't it? Because you've
Exactly.
done a what
You're just
if.
being curious. You're just following your interest.
Yeah, yeah. So being creatively curious builds confidence, doesn't
It
it? It
does.
really
It
does.
does massively. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you're then coming back to tapping into your authenticity, aren't you? By being curious about who you are and what you want to do.
And I think with journaling as well, Ruth journaling, you're talking about your morning pages
That's
are
right.
more
Yeah.
written journaling, aren't they? Whereas I'll do, it's almost like scrapbook journaling or sketchbook journaling, where you're actually putting photographs of things that your own work or somebody else's and reflecting really on what it is that's attracting you. I think that's different from sketchbook itself.
It's a bit more analytical, isn't it? It's less
But
around getting ideas down, but more of a kind of a critique of your own work. It's definitely something that you can use to build your confidence in what it is that you're trying to say if you've got a good sketchbook practice. But sometimes people just want to be told what to do. If it was that simple, I don't think there'd be the same kind of magic in art that there is.
although that does lead us on to our next point. Because when you first start or at a later date, there's times where you think, I really don't quite know what to do. And then you might go to somebody. So a lot of people or hobby artists, they'll go to people to teach. If they're somebody who's wanting to be a professional artist, they'll go to a university or they'll do a course on it. So sometimes it's hard to do it by yourself, or it's easier. It shortcuts, doesn't it? If
Yeah,
we
it
actually
does.
move forward
Yeah.
using other people.
Yeah, definitely. Leaning on their experience and
Yes. And so when sometimes people just want to tell you want to be told what to do to get started, sometimes that's a great place to
yeah,
start.
yeah, definitely.
I used to teach more step-by-step things, and I don't really do that as much in the same way, unless it's like a technique or something like that.
Yeah.
But it does get people started, as long as at the same time they realise that it's not all about technique. It's about the fact that to get that authenticness in there, you want to be
You want to put some of
inspired, and we
yourself
do
in it
work.
as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it needs to be stuff that you want to paint.
Yeah, it does.
It's a really good tip right from the beginning. Don't paint something you don't want to paint, not
Yeah.
unless it is absolutely about a technique you want to learn. Just don't paint
Yeah. It's
what you don't,
not
just
worth it,
paint,
is it?
paint to enjoy yourself.
Yeah, definitely. And you'll be on that constant learning journey as an artist anyway, whether it's a technique or whether it's learning about different artists or mentors as well, can be really helpful to get you past certain blocks that you may have and to build your confidence and to find out maybe what's standing in the way as well. That I'll
Yeah.
not go into that because that's another topic within itself. But I've found that helpful in the past in my art journey as well.
Yeah, and learning from other artists isn't always that they are mentors or teachers. It could be that you're just inspired by somebody else's work,
Yeah.
going to an art exhibition. We all learn from what's happened before.
Yeah.
That's just something else to bear in mind. So if you're short of inspiration, then have a look. It doesn't have to be an artist from the past. It can be a contemporary artist. And you can sometimes they'll tell you what their process is or look at their techniques, or you can see them painting on YouTube, or you can look on Pinterest. There's Instagram.
Yeah.
There's loads of
There's
places
loads.
to just have a look and see what other people are doing,
Yeah.
as well as where the historical sides of things can be quite interesting as
Yeah.
well.
And I think it's important when you are looking for inspiration and artists and you're looking at your social media to have, because you can look at it in two different ways. You could see a successful artist and think, I'm never going to get there, I'm never going to be that good. And it could bring up things around comparison and envy. But actually, if you realise the amount of hours that that person is putting to get to where they're going, also bear in mind that on social media, it's all literally a highlight reel of your life, isn't it? You don't see the times where they're having a really bad day in the
You see all their
studio.
failures
Everything that they do is
that are under the bed.
rubbish. You don't see that bit. So I think it's important to remember that and also frame it as it's something to aspire to and it's something that you can build up on within time, but you can't expect to get there straight away, can you?
No, and if you like look at others to get ideas as well,
Yeah,
what sort of
yeah.
yeah. There's two sides of the coins there, isn't there? What we were saying is
Mm.
you can look at other artists and get inspired, or you can look at other artists and be like, I'm never going to be as good as
Yeah.
them, and that, to be honest, you're never going to be them.
No, you're not, and you shouldn't even try to be
You don't
because
want to be them.
everyone produces different art, don't they? You're never gonna
Yeah,
be. And if you are copying someone, then that really is not the point, is it? It takes the joy out of it.
yeah. What you want to do is learn who you are as an artist,
Yeah.
and once you start doing that, your confidence
That'll give
does
you that
come,
real
doesn't it?
inner confidence, yeah. Yeah. And if you
Yeah.
can there's nothing better than being able to stand in that place and know that the stuff that you're producing is you. And I think then when people come along and they either hate it or love it, doesn't really matter because the confidence isn't anything. I don't think you get it from other people. I think real
No.
confidence is your kind of your core being as a person. It's not about reaching for compliments or likes on
No.
Facebook.
Of course, it takes time. You
Yeah.
can't expect to both either find your authentic art or do all of those things overnight,
Yeah.
but it's a really great journey to go on. It
It
is. It
is, it's
just is.
never ending, isn't it? And it's fascinating. And yeah, to
It's
me, it
exciting.
makes me
It's a
feel
bit of a
more
roller coaster
human.
sometimes, yeah.
Mm,
But if you go with it
yeah,
and you with the bravery, you'll build your confidence over
yeah,
time. And when we say confidence, it's not confidence for other people, it's confidence for you.
yeah, it's
That's the
within
difference.
yourself. Yeah, for sure. I think the other important thing about building that confidence as well is having a community of people around you that really understand what it is to be an artist. So I think we've discussed this quite a few times before in terms of community, but that could be like your local art group or it could be your connections on social media. But what I found when I was at the beginning of my art journey, meaning friends and family don't always get it, do they? They don't get the whole creativity thing. And it's not that anyone's meaning to be difficult or put you down or anything like that at all. It's just that being an artist is such a different way of sometimes it's difficult for them to get their heads around and their advice is not always that helpful. But if you've got like-minded people that you can speak to about these things, I think it does really help build your confidence as well. And
What
I think in general the art community is just so lovely.
they are generally so lovely.
Yeah,
I don't think I've ever had a group that's not been
I
lovely.
know. I know.
And the other thing is, you find that people who aren't artists are really not that interested in talking about. They might say, "Oh, yeah, that was a wonderful sunset," or something like
Yeah.
that. But sometimes these nuances that we go into, or that sky was just like a cobalt sky, or we talk about the newest colour that we've got
Yeah.
into, or
Yeah.
whatever. And a lot of people are really not very excited
I know.
about.
So you don't want to
That's
bore
that's what I
people
find,
either with
and
your art
their
too.
eyes glaze over. When you're in a community,
Yeah, you can
they
do all of
actually,
that stuff. Yeah.
yeah, they love all that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think in general to be around people that are like you, it helps build your confidence and your authenticity as well.
Yeah, whether it's art or anything else, to
Yeah,
be
yeah,
fair,
yeah.
with like-minded
Yeah.
people. And the other thing is, what I notice is that when you're on your own and you're painting, sometimes people slow up when they're in like art classes and stuff like that. They'll slow up and then they come back and they're like, oh yes, I forgot. We've been getting that a little bit in Art Hub, haven't we?
Yeah, yeah,
Lynn was so enthusiastic. It
yeah.
was just lovely.
It's great.
And it was lovely. She was like, I've forgotten how much I love it. And that's just the community again. We're talking about it. We're giving
Yeah,
ideas,
it's
sharing.
building that momentum, isn't it? And that
It.
inspiration and, yeah, to people to step more into their art.
So that brings us on to takeaways.
Yeah. Do you want me to go first? So I think that there's not particularly one thing, but I think there was a common theme that I felt was cropping up during our conversation, and that was around the time it takes to become confident and the patience that you need to have with yourself, and almost like the kindness and the empathy that you also need to have towards yourself to really build that confidence in a genuine way. That was something that stood out to me, that I think once you give yourself gentle encouragement and do things step by step is a really nice way of thinking about going about this.
Yeah, I think for me, with creative confidence, it feels like you go through patches of it. So when you start, you're a little bit like, whoa, and you have to dig in for your bravery, don't you? You have to get
Yeah.
started. And then sometimes you go through this excitement period. It's a cycle. I think it's like a cycle, a bit
Yeah.
like the creative process, that you go through different patches of confidence as well. And I think it's actually related to where you are in your own sort of creative cycle as well, which is quite interesting because we have not talked about this beforehand, have we? But it's come to me because at the moment we're starting new things again.
Yeah.
So you almost have to. I'm starting a new collection, and we're starting Art Hubs, and you have to dig deep
Yeah,
again
you do.
and
To get that
find that creative
confidence.
confidence as you come
Yeah.
into a new body of work or and then you get the excitement phase, and it is. And if you know that from the beginning, because this is something that artists have to learn over time, but having confidence is definitely about just doing it, and then you get the excitement. So
Yeah,
it's well worth it. So I
definitely.
hope this has helped. If you've got any questions, do ask in the comments below, because
Yeah.
we're definitely not an expert in it. I'm not an expert in creative confidence.
No, and we love to hear people's thoughts and feedback as well, because everyone's different, and it might be that you've got a tip or a tool that could help other people as well.
Yeah, or just tell us your experience and
Yeah.
how your confidence is built, or maybe you agree with us about this cycle. I just think I love doing these podcasts because I always come away and think, oh, that might be something new that I've learned.
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it, how these things crop up in our chats.
Yeah, it is. Oh, the other thing is, do we want to mention Art Hub? Because we have opened
Yes,
for
we do
founders.
want to mention Art Hub because we're officially open now, aren't we, for founders? So we're welcoming on our first 100 founders. And as a founder member, it means that you'll get a discount of 20%, and you'll have that for the lifetime that you're with us for the membership. And it's just £16 to join. And you get a 2-week free trial as well. But this episode definitely touches on a lot of stuff that we do in the Art Hub, doesn't it, Debs, in terms of building confidence?
It definitely does. Yeah. Yeah. And we wanted to do Art Hub. It wasn't just about everybody else, it's about the community, because we wanted to be in that community, didn't we?
Yeah, we want to learn from each other and inspire other people and come together as a group of artists in a space that's outside of social media with all that noise.
Yeah.
And Debs does things like art in practice in there, which is technique videos. I do an artist inspiration blog, which is all about inspiring people. So these are all of the ingredients really that you need to build your confidence and your authenticity as an artist. That's what we really hope to, don't we? Is nourish a group of artists, whether you're beginners or professional.
We
And
just
just
like you to be creatively curious.
Yeah, definitely. It's a fun space to be.
Yeah, it is.
We'll put a link, won't we, in our notes if you're interested in joining our hub.
We will do, yeah. And if there's comments in Spotify, we'll be in Spotify, and we're also in YouTube, so do like and subscribe as well. I always forget to say that.
I know, we ought to say that every episode. We're rubbish, aren't we?
We are
Confident
really
artists.
rubbish. Yeah, too busy talking about art. Okay, so I'll say bye for now.
I'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.